All right. Happy Friday. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. Welcome to the March Survival Call Sales and Marketing Series. I'm Tom Stimson. I've got some fun stuff for you, I think, this week. I've certainly enjoyed putting it all together. If you were on the earlier call, you're not going to get a single redundant thing. We have all sales and marketing stuff we're going to talk about here today. All right, without further ado, I think we're recording. I'll remind you how Zoom works. Hopefully you are hearing me. The Q&A, there's a Q&A box. If you'll use that to ask questions, that's most helpful. The chat box, if you're having a problem with your with audio or how to use the system, you can put a chat in there and I will promptly ignore it because I've got too many things to pay attention to. So hopefully you don't need that. But what I really do want are your questions, and feel free to ask questions anytime while I'm riffing, whatever it is I'm talking about. Or raise your hand. If you raise a hand, if I'm not seeing your question or you need some attention, raise your hand. That's a button on the top left-hand corner of your control panel. So without further ado, let's start with, as always, what's on my mind this week. And, well, where to start? Stool, three-legged stool. Business is a three-legged stool. Sales, operations, finance. We're primarily here today because you're interested in sales and marketing things. And I'm going to take an executive level approach to sales and marketing discussion here and help you figure out where to start in your business. You may have been through a similar exercise. You may have stopped and started many times, but it's always a good time to revisit, make sure that you are working on the right things. And I say this from experience, so not just my own experience, but working with clients who, come to me with, I know you probably can't read the whiteboard behind me, but the top 5 owner requests, cash flow, profit, growth, satisfaction, harmony, and they've already been working on something and they've made something a priority, and they go, well, don't worry about that. We're working on that. That's a priority. And in fact, what I find is that they've started in the wrong place. The thing that they're working on, they're actually working against themselves because there's something else they need to be working on first. So knowing where to start is very important. So I've got a little diagnostic that I've created, and I've been working on this and refining this. And I just recently wrote a blog post on it. It should be on my website by now. I know it's on LinkedIn. But let me ask you a question. We're going to do a quick diagnostic. I've got 4 statements on the screen right now, and I'll read them with you. And what you're trying to determine is which of these statements is most like your business. None of them are going to be 100%. You may have a little bit of each of them in your experience, but there's one that is like you most of the time, most days, and that's the statement we're looking for. So statement number 1 says, you write a lot of proposals without much action. In other words, you're kind of a proposal mill. You send quotes to clients, you have trouble getting them to respond, you write a lot of quotes that you end up canceling, your close rate's not very low, you feel like you churn a lot, but you don't get a lot of confirmed business. You spend most of your time writing proposals. Or customers say they like your work, but they still shop around. You know that experience where you just had a great event, you just finished a wonderful project. The client says, yeah, that's awesome. No, we don't really want to talk about a 3-year contract. No, we don't want to talk about the next job, but I'll make sure that you're on the bid list. In other words, they like your work, they're happy with you, and they still send it out to quote. There's no loyalty there. There's no long-term engagement. Number 3. Customers tend to focus on your mistakes more than your successes. You go out, you do a great job, you do 1,000 things correctly, and all the client wants to talk about when the project is over is the one thing that didn't go well. You don't get credit for all the things you did right. You only get talked down to about the one thing that went wrong. Or number 4, customers often ask you to take on roles that other suppliers have failed at. In other words, they come to you and say, do you guys do this? Is this something that you can do? Would you take this on? And that sounds like a pretty wonderful position to be in, or maybe it's not for you. which of these is most like you? So pick one, pick two, pick three, pick four. Which is the one that fits you most often? And that's going to tell us something. Got it? Okay. All right. This is a customer response profile. I can use this diagnostic in one of two ways. The way that we're going to use it now is we're going to talk about what the manifestation is, which is one of the four statements that you just chose, and then what it tells me about your organization. And then I'll show you how I do it the other way as well. So for instance, say you chose statement number one, which is you're kind of a proposal mill. You write a lot of quotes, you don't get the response and the interaction from your clients, you don't get a chance to negotiate, you find out that you didn't win the job after it's too late to do anything about it. And this happens to you more often than not. So you're in a proposal mill, and what that tells me about your organization is that your brand is probably weak to some degree of weakness, and that you are internally focused. In other words, your time and attention and processes are looking inside instead of looking outside, and we'll talk about what those things mean. Now, if you chose number two with the clients who, love your work and then put the job out to bid next time, there's indifference. The client is indifferent to you. It tends to mean, what I typically find is that means you are customer focused. You're getting the right engagement with the customer, but your brand is weak. Therefore, you're not getting that long-term commitment because your brand is not helping keep that business. So the weak brand is leading to the indifference of your customer. All right. Now, if you pick number three, you have a client that's really good at finding out all the things you did wrong, and they focus on that instead of the things that went right. We're dealing with the problem of missed expectations. In other words, your brand is strong. The client has very high expectations for you, but because you're internally focused, you look at things in your own terms instead of customer terms, and therefore we miss the opportunity to help the customer realize that they are indeed very happy with your work. And instead, they focus on the things that didn't line up the way that they would have done them, and that's the things that they tend to focus on. A lot of times when you're missing expectations, the customer's just trying to say, hey, if you'd paid more attention to me, this wouldn't be a problem. Strong brand, internally focused. Now, if you pick number four, you're actually in a great spot. You have a strong brand, you're customer focused, you have a good value proposition, and you have customers who go, wow, if you're good at this, maybe you're good at something else. Maybe you can do this for me. They want more from you. They want to buy more from you, and they want to know how they can do that. Perhaps we're missing the opportunity to share how to do that, but the important thing is they want more. Now, these are conditions. If I understand these customer responses, then we kind of know what to work on. So let me show you a little bit more about what each of these things mean. How do you know if you have a weak brand or a strong brand? Well, when you're looking at yourself, it's difficult. We're really good at looking at other people and other businesses and immediately spotting, whether or not we feel their brand. And it's all about personal perception. Okay, no two people will perceive brand exactly the same way, but in the aggregate, if you take thousands of people or even hundreds of people, in aggregate, while they may come about the decision differently, we have a real good sense of what brands are strong and what brands are weak. Now, a weak brand, obviously I haven't heard of you. That might be an indication your brand is weak. It simply might mean that I'm not your target audience, therefore your marketing and advertising has never reached me. But however, if I have heard of you and my perception of you is that you represent low quality or low performance, okay, that's going to give you a weak brand. Now, what would cause that? All right, crummy websites will cause that. That's probably the most common cause nowadays. If we look at somebody's website and go, wow, these guys are really low rent. We're not seeing anything here that says quality. Somebody can drive past your business or drive up to your business or walk into your business and come to the same conclusion. Sometimes a brand is weakened by being associated with negative brands. the story, the negative brand story I tell, and I'm going to date myself here, is, back in the 80s and 90s, when we got a writer from a band specifying the equipment that they needed to support them, the monitor system and the backline gear and everything, there was very often a clause in there that says, I need this processing equipment, and here are the brands that are acceptable. And then in bold letters, it would say no Peavey products. Now, Peavey was a great brand, but Peavey was a product line that was designed for personal use. It's the gear you bought at the music shop where you bought your guitar or bought your personal amp. It wasn't the pro gear. And so it had a reputation for being low rent. It was inexpensive. It actually worked fine, but the perception was that it was a weak brand. And so if you had Peavey equipment or Peavey on your website, you were automatically perceived to be a weak brand because you were associating with a negative brand. Now, having said all that, Peavey is a fantastic business, and they're now much more highly regarded in current era, but there are always brands that have negativity assigned to them. So another type of weak brand is if they simply don't understand what you represent. If they look at your website and they don't get anything out of it, they don't have a good or a bad feeling, well, that ends up being a bad feeling. So they're not sure what you represent. So these are things that'll trigger a weak brand. A strong brand, on the other hand, well, that's hopefully is something you've heard of. And the strongest brands are the brands who, while we may not even know the business, we've at least heard of them. And certainly in the AV industry, this is very common. Over time, you're going to hear names pop up in conversations and see their marketing, see their advertising, see a booth at a show, see a name tag, run into them in your client's office. You're going to hear of things without even knowing anything about them. And that is actually going to strengthen their brand for you. A strong brand is something that represents value to an outsider. So if you're on the outside looking in, there's something about that that's valuable to you that's going to increase the brand. Again, that's why it's very hard to evaluate brand ourselves. However, if I'm inside an organization, I can look at employees and look at the pride that employees take in their own company and their work, and that's going to be an indication of whether or not the brand is strong. How do they use the company name in conversation? Okay. If you have suppliers that want to be associated with you. Now, granted, everybody wants to sell you stuff. I mean, there's no shortage of reps showing up at your door that want you to churn product for them. That's not the same thing as wanting to be associated with you. They want your money, but are they willing to go the extra mile so that their name is next to your name? And that's an indication of a strong brand. My favorite indication, though, is that outside observers presume that whatever you do, you're going to succeed at. Now, this is our little private group here, so we'll talk company names from time to time. A really strong brand in the live events and now the integration industry and the concert touring industry is LMG. There's an organization that's been very successful with everything they've chosen to take on. And those of you who know the owner, Les Goldberg, know what a focused individual he is. If Les called me up one day and said, Tom, I've decided to open up a hotel chain that caters to conventions because I want to get control over the AV space in corporate events, I would have presumed that he's going to succeed. That's the power of his brand. Okay? So if you think anything that somebody touches is going to turn to gold, okay, they've got a great brand. Now, we talked about brand, strong versus weak, which was the vertical line. Now let's talk about the focus, the horizontal line, internally focused. This is going to sound like most of you because most of our businesses in our industry tend to be internally focused. And the reason is that we're all kind of gearheads and we're process heads and we're control freaks. So we tend to focus on the things that matter more to us. Internally focused companies have a way of doing things and they expect the customer to adapt to those things. In other words, here's how we do business. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. You can be a very successful internally focused company, but it is going to affect where you need to focus your energies in terms of growing your business. If the mood in your company or the mindset of your company is that doing things the right way is more important than what the customer's budget is. Now, we see two primary manifestations of this. We see in live events, we see throwing, the client buys this, they buy these products at this price, and our technical team looks at that and says, I don't want to do that. And they go get the good gear, and they put the good gear on there because this is the right way to do this. We don't want to be associated with a bad project or a subpar show. It's our standards that matter, not the customer standards. Okay, that's putting my internal focus ahead of a customer focus. This is a how and what thing. If you describe what you do in technical terms, you're definitely internally focused. If you believe that it's difficult for outsiders to work in your system, you're internally focused. I find this a lot when I hear, well, we can't hire a freelancer to do that. We have our own way of doing things. I need to find somebody who understands how to do that. I can't hire a new project manager because we haven't written down how our project management works. All of these are internally focused things. So it's all about focusing more on the the how than focusing on where we should be on the what. So how is internal, what is customer. Now, customer-focused companies, yay, the customer point of view is a prime consideration. I don't often hear when I'm in your offices, your employees and your team talking about the customer point of view. I hear them talking about how to change the customer point of view, but I don't hear them about adapting to the customer point of view. If you have systems and processes that adapt to the customer, this is customer focused. That's awesome. If you don't have one way of doing business, you have ways of doing business that take into account how the customer does business. That's customer focused. You could take it to an extreme. There's, a tragic flaw is an excess of a virtue. Customer focus is a virtue. You can take it too far. If you focus on outcomes framed in customer perspective, that's certainly customer focus. You make it easy for outsiders, especially suppliers, to participate in customer support. That's a huge indication that you're customer focused. You want the entire experience to work for them. Again, now we're focusing on the what more than on the how. So that should be fairly self-explanatory. We understand now, hopefully, the difference between customer focus and internally and strong brand and weak brand. What are we going to do about it? So what if you're down here in the proposal mill area and you want to be up here in the value prop area? And there's some wonderful things. If you're in the value proposition area, man, we can work on strategy and all sorts of cool stuff. But if we're down in proposal mill, we got to work on something to get us to a better place, because that's not a strong position to be in for growth and profitability. The challenge, and I think I've got 100% accuracy on this, is I've got a management team I have to work on. So if I discover through this process that I'm dealing with a proposal mill company, this is not about sales and marketing. This is not about improving their product or operations. This is management. All the early heavy lifting I have to do with this organization is changing a management mindset. I may not have the management team I need. I may not have them in the right roles. We may not have the right expectations. But the problem is going to be in management. And sometimes in a small company, that's simply the owner. I have to start there, because whatever is creating this condition of being internally focused and not developing a strong brand is going to reside in that individual or that group of individuals. And if we work on it, we might end up over here we may fix our customer focus first and end up over in the indifference area. And now we've got a different problem to work on. But if you're in quadrant 2, we're going to work on sales and marketing. Assuming I've got a good management team and we want to make some improvements, it's the sales and marketing that's going to make a difference. It's not to say that there aren't other areas that need help, but I feel confident at that point to putting some energy into sales and marketing, developing a plan, developing some follow-through, so that we can attack this indifference. We're going to raise the profile of the brand. We're going to improve the position of the brand and address that indifference that way. Hopefully that'll drive us right up into the value proposition area. If I'm struggling with the missed expectations phenomenon, then my focus as a consultant is probably going to be on operational response. Your focus as management needs to be on operational response. It's not performance that's going to be the issue. It's how you interact with the customer. What's the operational response in customer terms? And often what I'm going to find in a missed expectations environment is a huge line between sales and operations. You know, that divide, that chasm between sales and operations usually manifests with this missed expectations. It's difficult for sales to sell something that when operations is going to do whatever they want to do. And customer's response was, hey, everything was great. You operations guys are wonderful. However, this one thing I told the salesperson was really important to me, you didn't do. So we have to work on the operational response. Now, our goal is to get up into value proposition, and we may be just barely into the value proposition quadrant. But once we're there, once we've made progress on our brand and our customer focus, we can start working on strategic initiatives. Now, I'll give you an example. If somebody calls me up and says, hey, Tom, we're really struggling, you know, with you know, this and this, but, you know, we have a plan. We're going to move into a new marketplace, or we're going to add a new product. That's a strategic solution when they haven't addressed the fundamental problems. If we address the fundamental problems, now strategic initiatives make sense. Now we can look at geography. Now we can look at adding products and services. Now we can look at new customer segments. All of these things become more viable when we have a strong brand and we're customer focused. You know, one, you're going to be expected to succeed. You're going to have the endorsement and the input of your customers. It's going to be more difficult to make bad choices given those two conditions. So if strategic ideas is where my client, my customer, you, that's where you want to put your energy, then we need to have the conversation about cleaning up all these other things, getting rid of that noise so that we can make our efforts in that area stick. So, well, that was on my mind today. There's 22 minutes of brain dump on that subject. If there's no questions on it, I'll move on to some questions that you guys have sent in. Yeah, I know it's Friday, it's springtime. Okay, no questions. All right. If you think of them later, feel free to send them to me. I love answering questions. You can't bother me. Send me an email. Now, we'll talk about some of the questions that you have sent in, and some of these have come out of my work with current clients and advisory clients, some of whom are on this call. So this may sound like you, it may not, but hopefully this is something that will matter to all of you. I had a recent question about multi-year contracts, and this comes up from time to time, but you know, I've kind of codified a methodology that I think will help a lot of you. In this particular case, this has to do with pricing adjustments. And well, the question reads, per your advice, we've adjusted our pricing to be more scalable. We expect some of our longtime association clients to struggle with any kind of price increase. You mentioned offering multi-year deals to phase in new pricing. What exactly does that look like? Okay, so I guess this is more of a pricing question, and the multi-year contract is the solution. So this is obviously a rental-based client, a live event client. They're working with associations who are more prone to do multi-year contracts. They tend to be more price-driven. They like the idea of locking in pricing. They like long-term relationships. The barriers to change in this marketplace are a little bit higher. They work a lot from committee. It's harder to get them to change suppliers. You've got to screw up pretty badly. But on the other hand, their pricing is going to be lower. Your margins are going to be lower. You know, it's all a trade-off. So it's nice work because it's reliable, and you always know next year's show, when the dates for next year's show is at least a year in advance, right? So in this situation, the backstory on this is they had the first major association client that they were going to introduce new pricing. And this particular client that prompted this conversation, the pricing that they were working from was actually eight to 10 years old. They had products, they hadn't changed the scope. The supplier, my client, had been basically duplicating the same bid for 8 years. So they had 5,000 lumen LCD projectors in the main tent. We're now in an era where a 20,000 lumen DLP 3-chip projector is like a common answer for the same application. So they were way behind the times, and they were scared to death of, trying to get the client to start paying for what they'd actually been sending. So they'd stopped sending 5,000 lumen LCD projectors years ago and substituting better stuff. So they'd gotten themselves into a horrible pickle. So our first task was set that all aside. Quit worrying about what the client's going to do. We need to get your pricing straight. So we updated the pricing. We looked at their rack rates. We eliminated all the opportunity for SSTs, which are stupid salesman tricks. And stupid salesman tricks are those one-time price adjustments that last forever. We drop that price 1 year, and then for the next 8 years, they're paying that same lower price. It's keeping out-of-date solutions on the job because we're afraid to introduce the new product. All of you, every one of you has a product on your shelves that you would have thrown away years ago, but you have one client that uses it every year. And so you have to keep it because you're afraid to talk to them about the replacement product because the replacement product costs 4 times as much. Cowards. Duration discounts. A duration discount is when we charge somebody a day for a week-long show. So these are all the tricks that we've used to get to the client's price, not to mention ridiculously high discounts. We update all the pricing. We find out what our pricing should be today. Never mind what that customer will pay. What should our pricing be today? I take that client's job and we do what I call bid it straight. Write the job like it's somebody who just came to you for the first time. Take all the SSTs out of it. Put a fair discount, in this case for an association client, on it, and figure out what the job is worth. Now we've got a delta. Now we have the difference between what they've been paying and what they would be paying if you had kept up with them and done the proper upgrades on pricing and equipment along the way. Now I know how much I'm having to work. Now I know what the gap is I need to close. I need to call the client. I need to soften the beach. I need to verify what's important to them about our relationship. And please, I hope it's something more than price, because if the relationship is all based on price, this is going to be more challenging. They've stayed with you for a reason. You probably have people that they love. They have it's their favorite project manager. They're part of the family. Maybe they're just lazy. Maybe they didn't know they were supposed to be looking at other suppliers. Find out. It's going to affect how you negotiate through this change process. Validate their needs and concerns, let them know that you hear them, et cetera, and say, oh, by the way, we're going to have to modernize your event. There are some things that have been on your pricing and on your thing that are no longer valid. This product doesn't exist, and there's no replacement product at that price point. So this year, rather than making some little bitty incremental changes, we're going to show you the way it's done now. We're going to rip the Band-Aid off and take you a new package and show you what that looks like. Now, I think in the next slide, we'll talk about the option. You're going to get resistance. You're going to get a lot of objections. Most of them are going to be single level objections, which means you just need to have 1 or 2 responses to make that objection go away. But we have to broach the subject first. And so I was brainstorming with my client on how to broach this with their customer. How do you start the conversation? Let's talk about how we can bring your event forward with the least impact to your budget. So in Softening the Beach, we've determined that they're very sensitive about budget. Okay? But it's important that they bring the technological approach to their event forward, and we need to make a case for that. So why is that important? Okay. Well, one, I can't afford to give you 20,000 lumen projectors for $500 a day anymore. Okay, that's a challenge that needs to be addressed. We can talk about the products and personnel that your budget has been based on all these years are no longer part of what we offer. We're just simply not doing that anymore. You can talk about outcomes. You say you may not realize that your audience can see the difference. You're not upgrading your event, but your audience sees the difference, and they devalue your brand because they're used to seeing better video. They're used to hearing better audio than what you've let us provide you. People, if people are important to them, and very often it is, the people you requested for your event are now more skilled and more in demand than when we first started. And I find this all the time. Just to throw out broad numbers, I find, veteran audio engineers on association work being billed $450 a day, when in a corporate environment, in current numbers, we would probably be billing $750 a day for them. And we're not even covering the cost of that employee or that freelancer to do this gig. So we get really upside down because we're afraid to talk to the client. So don't change your pricing, change your product. Say, hey, the product of this audio engineer has changed. He is now, or she is now, $750 a day. However, if you want a $450 a day, well, I don't have a $450 a day audio person anymore. I have a $500 audio person. Okay, but they're not going to be the same quality. They're not going to be the same person, and you're not going to see the same person year after year at that price. Okay, so don't change pricing, change the products. And then, once we've worked through all of this, we're down to brass tacks. We're going to have to give them a proposal. Thank goodness we've talked about the service proposal template, because this is the perfect application for it. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go check out the other webinars. Find the one on the service proposal, where I talk about how to write these, what these look like. These are very different from equipment rental proposals that many of you or product sales proposals. Service proposals work in integration, they work in live events, they work just about anywhere where the quality of the outcome is important to you and to the customer. In service proposals, we do optioning. We have 3 options. Okay, your 3 options in this situation where we're trying to introduce a new pricing paradigm and new technology to an old client who's probably price sensitive, here are what our 3 options look like. Assuming that the client does not want to change their budget has not evolved because we didn't create the expectation that their budget should evolve, and now they're 30% behind the value of the job. Option 1 will be something based on roughly that budget, maybe a few dollars more, maybe 5% more, but basically that budget. But we're going to reduce the capabilities to match their budget. Okay? We'll put in our new technology and new pricing, but we're going to reduce what all of that can do to match their budget, which might mean you have to eliminate some nice solutions. And in a ballroom environment, here's an example of what I mean. Say, for instance, they do a 1-camera documentation, occasional IMAG thing. They want the camera in the back of the room. Somewhere along the line, you sold them a long lens for basically what it cost you to sub-rent it, but we got the camera in the back of the room. It's out of everybody's way. You know what? That's a nice solution that they can no longer afford. So we have to take the long lens out of there, and we give them a solution that puts the camera back in the middle of the room, where it's going to compromise their seating a little bit. But again, this is what they can afford. So we get them to the original budget. We put a few things in there that it's like, this is not ideal, but my budget's not going up. All the capabilities are there, but I'm giving up a few would-be nice things. Maybe it's 1 downstage monitor instead of 3. Maybe it's 2 wireless mics instead of 8. Something that they can get by without, you've got to take out of that budget. Now, option number 2 is the direct replacement budget. We give them the event that they've been getting, but with the modern pricing, modern features, and we do a much better job of presenting those capabilities in the scope of work. So modernize it, update the pricing to the current specs so they can see what it's worth now. Remember, we had the old price and we had, the new price, that delta. The entire delta is caught in option 2. We show them what it really costs. Now, we know they can't afford that. We've already established that, but we'll get there in just a minute. And then option 3 exists to make option 2 look better. So in option 3, we say, here's what we think would make your event even more successful. And you introduce some concepts that are increase the audience, enhance the experience for the audience, improve the ROI of the event, however it might be measured. Put some good stuff in there. Add a little creative. Find a way to help them market their event. Ideate so that you get them to a better outcome, things they probably have never considered. Make it really valuable. That doesn't mean a ton more expensive, but it's certainly going to be more expensive than option 2. Option 3 makes option 2 look good. Option 1 makes option 2 look good. That makes sense? So now we've offered that to them. Now, honestly, we don't care which option they take. Option 1, option 2, option 3, you should be happy they're doing business with you. Move on, right? Assuming they take option 2, or they want option 2, but they don't want to overcome that price differential all in one blow. You got a little asterisk in there that says, talk to me about how we can make this less impactful to your budget. Now we're back to talking about a 3-year contract. Okay, so assuming they're going to take option 2, oh, by the way, you've got terms. Remember, you can also help them save money on terms. They get a discount for confirming early. They get a discount for paying early. There's all sorts of ways they can maximize their budget. And don't let associations tell you they can't pay for something until the event comes. Associations have money. It's budgeted. They have reserve funds. They're not living hand to mouth. They're just frugal because they're run by committees. But if you tell the committee they can save 10% by paying 100% in advance, all of a sudden you have the committee's attention. But the 3-year deal is, I won't take you all the way to the price on option 2. Say option 2 is, $30,000 more. Instead of 70 grand is 100 grand. Here's what I can do for you. You sign a 3-year deal. Year 1, it's 80 grand. Year 2, it's 90. Year 3, it's 100. Give them a declining discount. In other words, the discount gets smaller and smaller each year. Put a clause in there that says, if for any reason you cancel the contract, they forfeit the discount. Okay? They need the incentive to stay engaged through the 3 years. So the discount will convert to a deferred payment that's due when they cancel the contract. So they get their deal. You get the long-term relationship. They get to ease into the pricing, and they're going to get a deal that they're not going to get from anywhere else. Because that first year, they're going to get a $100,000 job for 80. Just saying. So if you got any questions about contracts, feel free to slip those in, and I'll take you to the next question here, the next subject that came up. Okay, yeah, this one, too many prospects. So a client emailed me, or maybe it was one of you, said, we finally looked at our database and cleaned out everyone's Outlook address book, which is always an adventure. And we have over 2,000 contacts that we have done business with recently, which after I talked to the person turned out to be over the past 5 years, which is fantastic. We want to start contacting them all, but we disagree on who to call first, what to prioritize, et cetera. Can you give us some guidance? Okay. I understand. Sometimes it's overwhelming when you see how big the opportunity is and knowing where to start, and you don't want to screw it up. The mindset that I run into is people believe if I call somebody and I do the wrong thing, I've blown the opportunity forever. And that often keeps us from picking up the phone. This is one of those cases where it is more important to have progress than it is to seek perfection. Progress, not perfection. You've got 2,000 people who have done business with you before. You want to re-energize them. You want to re-engage them. You want to, get them to learn about the new things that you do that you didn't do back then. You're trying to grow your business, and it's easier to start with people that you already know, right? You got two methods here. Okay, one, I can e-blast all 2,000 people and start qualifying and filtering the responses that I get. Send them out a reasonable call to action. These people already know you; they haven't heard from you. An e-blast, you'll probably get somewhere between 30 and 50% open rate. So that's, up to 1,000 people who at least look at the email you sent them. And if you have a reasonable call to action, invite them to click to learn something, receive something, whatever it might be, you might get 200 of those 1,000, 20% click through. All right, all of a sudden we got 200 hot leads, right? Now I know who I need to call right now. That's option one. Option two is I can go through the list, target the key prospects through some criteria, but I have a slide on that. Say, here's the criteria. Pick out the 50, 100, 200 people out of the list that you know you need to call and start calling them. My recommendation is you do both, okay? You do one and then you do two, and then when you filter out the leads, you do more of two. And there's really no substitution for this. In my clients who've done this is kind of a rekindling campaign. The benefits of rekindling relationships with people you already know, the payback is much, much, much faster than starting from scratch. So this is a lot of work, but there's a huge payoff to it. Now, the advantage of doing the broad reach, of starting with option one and just doing an email to 2,000 people, is you're not doing one email. You're going to email them and you're going to create a series of touches that are going to try and engage them over a long period of time. You will get long-term results. There are people on that list that you're going to have to tap, touch them on the shoulder, get their attention for 2 or 3 years before they'll do business with you. Waiting 3 years to contact them is not going to get you the business. You need to keep them engaged for 3 years before the business comes your way. That's how long it takes. So the broad reach means that you're starting that cycle, and you don't know what the cycle is. You don't know when they're going to buy. I say it all the time. I have clients, I've been doing this for over 10 years. I still have people that I contacted the first year I was a consultant calling me up and saying, well, we talked the other day. And I was like, no, I talked to you 9 years ago. And now they want to do business. So go for the long-term results. Get in the habit of reaching out. Email marketing works. Trust me, it works. You have to do it. Start now. It's also much less expensive than the direct personal contact, which you still need, but you don't need it for 2,000. You need it for probably 200. All right. So the targeted reach, this is that picking up the phone and calling people, you're going to get fast results. I tell you what, if you will call 10 people you have not talked to for a while and say hello, so you miss doing business with them, what's going on in their world, share something valuable with them, say, well, think of me, I'll give you a call in 3 months, I'll have something else wonderful to share with you, or invite them to a party. If you'll do that with 10 people, you're going to get one hit. And that hit might lead to another conversation, lead to a meeting, lead to an RFP, lead to business. If you get 10 hits, I guarantee you're going to get a piece of business. Okay? You might even get 2. Okay? You have to make the contacts. You have to do the outreach. So the challenge with this is it's hard to maintain. If you start this targeted outreach, the people that are doing that are going to get caught up in those hits. And they call 10 people and they got a hit. Now they're processing an RFP. And they call 10 more and they get another hit. Now they've got 2 RFPs and they've got a meeting. Oh, and then they got this. And all of a sudden they're not making the calls anymore. And then we don't get what we're trying to get out of this. So it's harder to maintain. You need the electronic marketing to help fill in the gaps for you. So how do we do this? Start an email campaign. It's a campaign, and you can have multiple campaigns depending on what segments you sell to. I've got a couple of clients right now. We're going through this exact same thing. They were more concerned about marketing to 2,000 people, when in fact, there's 200 people that are really important and quite different from everyone else. Those people get an email campaign. The other 1,800 get a different campaign. Okay? A good campaign is going to build to something. I keep saying call to action. I need them to click on something. It's got to be something that's valuable to them, not something that's valuable to you. Events are a great way of doing that. Inviting people to an event that may be of value to them. Okay? Invite them to something 90 days from now. Set up the event, start talking about it. Okay? Start rebranding your company to these folks, building up to that event, and keep that invite going. Don't assume that you can send out an invite. You know, here's the marketing director talking to me. Say, well, Tom, we sent out that invite and we only got 5 confirmations. And I said, well, how many times did you send the invite out? Your 90 days, you know, your 8 weeks or whatever it is, 12 weeks to the event, send it out every week. You'll get more clicks every week, and the closer you get, the more confirmations you're going to get. You know, people do these things when they feel like it, not when you want them to, right? And now you reinforce it with targeted phone calls. So doing a campaign to 200 people that are driving them to an event at your office, for instance, and all you have to do is follow up with 200 phone calls, what would I consider success? If you can get 20 of those 200 people to say that they will be at your event and 15 show up, you are a rock star. Okay, that's a great return. Okay, you think you want 200 people to show up, and you know, yeah, it would be lovely. But if you only have 200 targets, getting 10% to show up is an incredible return. And because these are well qualified, they're already ideal customers, they've already bought from you, and you're re-engaging the relationship, and you can give them a huge amount of focus. And then you get to promote that event afterwards and say, here's what you missed. And say, but hey, I'm sorry you couldn't make this event, but why don't you come on over? We're having pizza on Friday. You're going to keep it going. You're going to keep contacting them. You're going to keep doing it. So if I'm going to do the targeted reach, how do I find that 200 out of the 2,000? Well, here's 4 criteria that I use. Okay? And you may need as little as 1 criteria to work. 4 is a no-brainer. They have to represent first-rate business. You do a lot of second-rate business. Okay? First-rate business is a slam dunk. It's a no-brainer. Those are people you want to reach out. There are a lot of folks that you've done second-rate business with. Your business you're not proud of, business you would do because it was good revenue. Okay, they don't get criteria 1. You need to have access to a decision maker. You're not always going to have that, but access to a decision maker moves this prospect up the list. They need to respect you as a person or a company. Respect is important. You need to have had a good relationship in some form or fashion, and it'd be ideal if you were regarded as an expert. Now, I don't need all 4 of these criteria to match. I'm happy with 1 or 2. So if I've got 2, absolutely, they make my targeted list. They go from the 2,000 to the 200, just like that. So prioritize by the number of criteria met, and you may find that people who are only meeting 1 point might not make the cut. You know, see how big the list turns out to be and what you have the time and energy to go after. And then what do? You call them. And then you call them again. I mean, that's it. You have to call them. Sure, you can send them some emails. This is targeted reach. Call them. People still talk on the phone. They still have conversations. Okay? Call them. They may reply with an email. You won. Call them. Okay? Here's how you get your call returned. If you're leaving messages and they're not responding to you, one of the issues I find is that you're not important enough. Sorry, no offense. If you're a salesman and you're calling the owner of a company, you are unimportant. Sorry. Get the owner of your company to call. Owners call owners back. It's not perfect. It doesn't always work. It works a lot better. I mean, who wakes up in the morning and says, gee, I want to talk to a salesman today. I think I'll return all those messages that so-and-so left. It doesn't happen. However, if you call and say, John, this is Bob Smith. I'm the owner of ABC Company. We've done some business in the past. I just need 5 minutes of your time. Could you give me a quick call back today? My mobile number is. You're important because you're an owner calling an owner. Okay. You're going to be undemanding 5 minutes of your time and commit to that. Do not take up more of their time unless they offer it to you. Quick call back today. It's urgent, okay, but it's flexible. And here's my mobile number. In other words, I'm as accessible as I can possibly be. Okay? You have a much better chance of getting that call returned. And make sure they're in your phone book, because when their name comes up, get up out of the meeting that you're in and go answer the dang phone, okay, because they are important. And then you have a question that'll take 5 minutes to discuss. Okay? It might end with an invitation, but you need that level of engagement. So if you're not getting your call returned, there's a person in your company who has a much better chance. And if he or she does not get their call returned, move on. Don't give up on that client. You know, keep sending them the e-blasts, keep them engaged, okay? But they're not ready to talk yet. It might be 3 years from now. Don't give up on them. Don't blow them off. Don't get your feelings hurt. Okay. Now they call back or they answer the phone. You say what? All right. There's a lot of things you can say. I usually take the approach of getting some advice from them. Say, hey, I'm having an open house in 6 weeks. And I'm trying to understand what would compel you to send some folks, or what would compel you to attend. Okay. Try as many different questions as you can to find out what the one works for you. You don't have to ask the same question on everybody you talk to. Okay. So if there's no more questions on that, we're doing pretty good on time. I want to take a moment and talk with you a little bit about my advisor program. A lot of the examples I use on these calls are coming from conversations with clients, as well as the questions you guys send in. So let's answer the question. Okay, Tom, what does it take to be in an advisor program? What's the benefit? Well, the benefit is we work on this stuff all the time. And the things that I talk about in the survival calls, the same things I talk about with the clients, but we go in more in depth. We tailor the responses to your specific situation. We come up with all sorts of solutions that apply directly to you. It's a one-on-one. And it's one that can be extremely valuable because we can talk about proposals, and I help process proposal opportunities all the time. We certainly help clients win a lot of valuable business and get opportunities they wouldn't have gotten otherwise, and that in and of itself pays for the fees. And the fees are based on 6 months engagements. And I don't do hourly engagements. We don't do fixed schedule calls, but you can have a fixed schedule call if it's helpful for you. I do unlimited advisories. You have unlimited access to my time. I have clients in this program I talk to or email with 5 times a week. I have people that I don't talk to twice a month, but when we do, it's in great depth so that everybody can interrelate in whatever way they want to. You're not forced to have an hour-long phone call every 4 weeks at a time that turns out to be inconvenient for you that day. You can reach out to me anytime that you want. That's the garden hose, what I call the garden hose effect. You know, the bucket brigade, you know, a little bit more immersion is that we do an advisory program where you get 2 full days in person and you can engage that way. So if you want to go over something big, if you want to start a huge initiative, if you feel like you really need to jumpstart something, the immersion program is great. You come to Dallas, I'll buy you dinner. We go to an offsite, we whiteboard, whatever it is that you need to get out of my brain for that day, I'm yours. We can make a huge amount of progress, and you can split the days up and do 2 separate days during your 6-month period. And if you renew, every time you renew, the next 6 months is less expensive. And if you buy a whole year, it's even a lot more or less expensive. The price goes down. And I also have programs for teams. So if you've got a sales team that you think would benefit from regular contact and access and coaching on helping them do their jobs better, then talk to me about that. We can set up those programs. And the way to start the conversation, real easy, go to my website, go to the contact page. There's an introductory conversation. You can click on the link. You can see my schedule. You can schedule a call. It'll be on your calendar. It'll be on my calendar. You know, do it now. okay, or do it in the middle of the night when you think about it, so that you don't have to play phone tag, you don't have to send emails and do the back and forth. Just decide that you want to have the conversation. No obligation. It's always free. And well, any of you could use it anytime. Even if you just have a question, feel free to reach out. So with that, and there's no questions, that brings us to the end of the session. That brings us to the end of the week. And actually, it's also the end of the month. So there we go. We got a trifecta going. So thanks for being with me. We'll see you next month. Have a great weekend.